When we think of UFOs, we tend to associate them with the sky, which is only natural. They're unidentified flying objects, after all. But what about the strange stuff that's been spotted deep below the water? Well, it turns out there's a lot of mysterious stuff lurking in the depths of Earth's waters as well, and some of it looks like it may have come from a galaxy far, far away. And we're going to start things off with Point Dume underwater base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, it's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a domed stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site." Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have Hy Brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing godlike beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included Hy Brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the islands appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote in the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across 2 chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945, when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning, I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin, wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be like digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. I didn't get that job. Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Project Grudge Report 13. Okay, I've read quite a few different UFO sighting stories and stories of alleged alien abductions, and this is fully one of the most terrifying I've ever heard of. So basically, the story starts off in March of 1956 when Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham in the White Sands Missile Testing Grounds near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The pair were out searching for debris from a recent rocket test when Major Cunningham heard a loud scream. His first thought was that Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a snake, so he went around to help aid his partner, and this is when he allegedly saw something that he never expected. He recounted seeing the sergeant being dragged away by some sort of long serpentine arm that had wrapped around his legs. Whatever this creature was, it was connected to a hovering disc that was in the air about 15 feet away. The major stood there in horror as he watched this creature and the sergeant retreat into the craft, which then rose vertically into the sky. Of course, he radioed for help, and while he was taken to the hospital for observation after this, search teams were sent out immediately. It wouldn't happen until 3 days later that they would find the body of Sergeant Lovett only 10 miles away from the site where he was said to have disappeared from. The autopsy performed on him later also only raised more questions than answers, as his body was severely harmed. So of course there was an investigation that happened, and many people claim that this investigation was detailed in a 600-page document labeled Project Grudge Report 13. But the problem with this is that no official information on Report 13 13 exists, and the US government denies its very existence at all. Though Grudge reports 1 through 12 have been declassified, along with report 14, no official mention or accounting of report 13 exists, and the story solely relies on secondhand accounts of this horrible incident. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Air Force disappearance. On the night of November 23, 1953, near the Canadian-US border, the United States Air Defense Command noticed a blip on their radar where there shouldn't have been one. This was showing that there was some sort of unidentified object that was in restricted airspace over Lake Superior. In response to this, an F-89C Scorpion jet was sent to investigate with 2 crew members. First Lieutenant Felix Moncla was piloting the craft, while Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson was observing the radar. Once in the air, the pair had trouble tracking the object, which kept changing its course, which then led to ground control helping to direct them. The jet pursued the unknown object for 30 minutes as it closed in on it at 500 miles per hour. After a while, the 2 blips on the radar, one being the unknown object and the other being the investigating jet, converged into one point, and then suddenly the radar return from the F-89 simply disappeared from ground control's radar scope. Shortly after this, the radar blip that was from the unidentified object also veered off and then vanished. The men who were sent to investigate in the jet never returned from the mission, and there was never any wreckage found signifying an accident despite extensive searches. The men and the jet just disappeared completely. It is said that the explanations for the disappearance that have been released throughout the years have changed and flip-flopped in what they say happened, so at this point, no one has any idea what really went on here. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dr. Brian O'Leary. Dr. Brian O'Leary is a former NASA astronaut and Princeton physics professor, and he has been quoted as saying that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been monitoring us for a very long time, and that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional materialistic Western point of view. Apparently, he also said that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use droids, they use co-rotating magnetic discs for their propulsion systems, which seems to be the common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. I obviously have no idea how I could possibly substantiate these claims, but they certainly are interesting, regardless of what you personally believe. And based on his education and work experience, it really is quite compelling. This could, of course, just be nonsense in order to stir up the masses, but it could also be someone who's finally telling us all the truth, but we're just too skeptical to believe it. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Roswell incident. This whole rigmarole started in 1947 when some sort of crash took place near a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Shortly after this, the Roswell Army Airfield released a statement saying that they had recovered a flying disc from the ranch, but the Army quickly retracted the statement and said that it wasn't that, but instead it was just a conventional weather balloon. This was a little sketchy, but most people let it slide until the 1970s. What happened in the 70s is that a retired lieutenant colonel began to speak out. In an interview with a UFO researcher, he said that the weather balloon story was a cover-up and that alien remains were actually recovered from the crash site. There were both first and second-hand witnesses who claimed that not only were there at least one, but possibly more alien spacecrafts that had crashed at the scene, that there were also extraterrestrial remains that were recovered by the military, who then began to engage in a cover-up. In 1994, the story changed from a weather balloon to a nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul, and it was stated that the stories of the alien bodies were probably just test dummies that had been dropped from high altitudes. I'm not gonna lie, the whole thing sounds a little sketchy. I obviously wasn't there, so I can't say for certain what happened, but someone is definitely lying. I'm just not sure who. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Stephenville UFO. In January of 2008, in the small town of Stephenville, Texas, a bunch of residents all saw something in the sky that they couldn't believe. In the beginning, it appeared to be white lights in the sky that were first in a single arc, but then they quickly moved to form 2 parallel lines. It was estimated that the lights were spanning about a mile long and half of a mile wide, but the craziest part is that it was flying at 3,000 miles per hour, which is similar to the speed of a fighter jet, but there was no sound reported at all. The government chalked this sighting up to a US Air Force flight operation, but many of the residents who saw this event on that day were absolutely not convinced and truly felt like they were lied to. Some even explained that what they saw was too technologically advanced for the human civilization. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Rendlesham Forest incident. This incident is often referred to as Britain's Roswell incident, and it took place in December of 1980. The incident took place in the Rendlesham Forest, which is a pine forest in England that, at the time, sat in between 2 United States Air Force bases, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Over several nights around this time of year actually, a number of credible military personnel reported strange and colorful lights both above as well as in the forest. Some of those who were sent to investigate the strange lights reported seeing a triangular craft at close range, and there was even a famous audio tape made of the encounter. After these happenings, the UK Ministry of Defence claimed that the incident posed no threat to national security, and because of that, it was never investigated further. What really happened in the forest all those years ago remains a total mystery, but those who actually witnessed the lights and the aircraft are said to have remained totally baffled. In our number 4 spot today, we have the unexplained UFO. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. There weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter, but using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings, and it didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and then they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 3 spot today, we have the USS Princeton UFO. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at around 80,000 feet before extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 went over in 2 fighter jets in order to kind of scope out the situation, and when they arrived, they saw what at first appeared to be churning water while there was just an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it at all. Like, no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jet didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. Like, when I say quickly, I mean it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of fighter jets. So faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know what exactly this was, but sure a lot of us are thinking the same thing. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cigar-shaped UFO. Let's set the stage. It's 2:45 a.m. on July 24th, 1948, and there are 20 passengers aboard a twin-engine propeller plane that is at 5,000 feet being flown from Houston to Atlanta by pilot Clarence S. Childs and co-pilot John B. Whitted. Out of the 20 passengers on board, 19 of them are asleep at these early morning hours, and everything seems to be going as per usual, until it wasn't. The 2 pilots and the 1 passenger who were awake all witnessed the same thing about 20 miles southwest of Montgomery, Alabama. About a week after the incident, the pilot explained what he had seen by saying, quote, "It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power, shooting flames from the rear some 50 feet. There were 2 rows of windows which indicated an upper and a lower deck, and from inside these windows a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship there was a blue glow of light. By his estimates, he watched the UFO for about 10 seconds before it completely vanished." The co-pilot gave a similar explanation and also added, quote, "The object was cigar-shaped and seemed to be about 100 feet in length." He continues on, quote, "I asked Captain Childs what we had just witnessed, and he said that he didn't know." While this is obviously very strange and peculiar, what has driven UFO enthusiasts even more is the fact that this strange sighting was of course later investigated by the US government, but the results of that investigation have allegedly been mostly destroyed. Does that mean maybe they found something they aren't willing to share yet? Some people believe that perhaps the pilots and passenger witnessed a secret Soviet spy craft, others believe it was definitely something of the extraterrestrial variety. In our number 1 spot today, we have the New Jersey UFO. This UFO sighting took place in 2001 just above the New Jersey Turnpike. On July 14th, 2001, just after midnight for around 15 minutes, motorists driving down this highway stopped to stare at the sky to witness what no one could believe. There were strange orange orange and yellow lights in a V formation just above the Arthur Kill waterway. There were a ton of witnesses who were all extremely confused and shocked as to what they were seeing. Air traffic controllers initially denied that there were any flying objects that could have caused the mysterious lights, but a group that is called the New York Strange Phenomena Investigators claimed that they received radar data that night that would corroborate the story that the witnesses were telling. It may not have been aliens, but it certainly was some sort of unidentified flying object that no one had ever seen before, and there were people from all walks of life witnessing it together.
Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary." Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sightings, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and second deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station, where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents, as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom, on October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?
So starting us off at number 10, cover-ups. So this might not be news in regards to the idea of alien life and the government's involvement, as it's long been theorized by believers that the government has been covering up truths in relation to ETs and UFOs. But if we are to believe what was said in Congress, then that means the theory wasn't wrong. A former intelligence official testified last Wednesday that the United States government has found and covered up evidence of extraterrestrial life for decades. One of the witnesses, retired Major David Grudge, alleged at a House of Representatives hearing about UFOs that the Pentagon has recovered crashed vehicles and biological remains believed to be of non-human origin. Quote, "I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program to which I was denied access. My testimony is based on information I have been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony." So yeah, and it only gets crazier from here. Moving on to number 9. Caught on video. Now, as I mentioned, there were 3 military veterans that were a part of this hearing. We touched on David Grudge in the last point, but the other 2 witnesses, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, and retired Navy Commander David Fravor, both testified they too had personal experiences with UFOs while on the job. One of the more shocking incidents in particular detailed by Fravor was an incident from 2004, where a UAP was caught on video. Now, UFOs, or UAPs as they're formally referred to by military personnel, are defined as any object that is detected but cannot be immediately explained. And while some end up having innocent explanations like being weather balloons or drones, others remain quite the mystery. The 2004 incident falls into the latter category. Fravor said it was several years before any officials followed up on the extraordinary events of the day, and even then, he added that nothing was done. Moving on to number 8. There's a support group. Obviously, there was a lot of juicy information being revealed at the hearing, and I don't know if this was news to everyone, but it was to me, so I'm adding it. The former Navy pilot Ryan Graves talked about how he had founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace group that supports aviators who have reported UAPs, which might not sound like the craziest thing compared to what else was revealed. I mean, there are support groups for tons of different things, but to think that people are likely to require support after coming forward with unexplainable sightings is kind of crazy. Like, what is happening after they submit this report? What did they see? What did their superiors do to them? Graves stated that the objects that are reportedly being seen by military and commercial pilots are, quote, performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. Further adding, quote, if everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. Moving on to number 7. Fear of coming forward. So branching off of my last point, during the hearing, much of the discussion centered on improving the process for reporting unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, but Grudge was also there to promote removing the stigma for aviators who report UAP sightings and to ensure oversight of government programs that investigate them. The former intelligence officer told the panel that he and several other colleagues have been the targets of what he calls administrative terrorism, and that he has at times feared for his life since coming forward. Which, I mean, would make a lot of sense if that's true, why a support group was put in place for those who report UAPs. Quote, "It was very brutal and very unfortunate. Some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally," he said, adding that there is currently an open investigation into the matter. Moving on to number 6. Safety issues. One of the major arguments this hearing was intending to focus on was that in not reporting or in discouraging reports, we are creating a national safety issue, and there is a push for intelligence agencies to be more transparent about UAPs in order to promote national safety. Supporters of this, like Democratic Rep. Robert Garcia of California, said, quote, "UAPs, whatever they may be, may pose a serious threat to our military and our civilian aircraft, and that must be understood. We should encourage more reporting, not less, on UAPs. The more we understand, the safer we will be." Grudge, Graves, and Fravor all echoed similar sentiments, explaining they would like to see a, quote, "safe and transparent reporting system." The men added that they are hopeful the public discourse is the first step towards eliminating the stigma and reports of UAPs to encourage others to come forward. Moving on to number 5. People have been hurt. So according to Grudge, not only have there been some pretty sneaky cover-ups as well as some shady treatment to those who come forward, but people have also been harmed and threatened in order to not reveal information. Grudge details that as a former intelligence officer, he would go to jail for revealing classified information, but when he was asked whether anyone had been harmed or injured to cover up information about extraterrestrial technology, he answered yes. Now, that alone is scary enough, but even more wild is that when he was asked if anyone had been killed, he said he had, quote, "directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities." Now, I get it. He can't say yes or no because it's classified and all, but that's kind of a creepy answer. Feels like he's trying to tell us yes without telling us that. Now, on the other hand, a spokesperson for the Pentagon, Sue Gao, told NBC News that Grudge's claims are false, but I mean, I don't know, man. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 4. Sightings are not rare. According to former Navy pilot and executive director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, Ryan Graves, it wasn't just the 2004 incident that raised some eyebrows. Graves also talked about an incident with a flying object off the coast of Virginia Beach in 2014. He said that while flying an F-18, he came across an aircraft that looked like a, quote, "dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere," which sounds pretty UFO-y if you ask me. Graves estimated the aircraft to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter and unlike any aircraft he has ever seen. But even more peculiar than its shape was that Graves claimed the UAP could remain stationary despite hurricane force winds. And according to Graves, sightings like this one are not rare, are not isolated. Plus, he explained that his squadron submitted a safety report at the time, but that he received no official acknowledgement of the incident. Moving on to number 3. A very small amount get reported. Now, despite the fact that Graves claims sightings are not rare, and the fact that it feels like there is always a new UFO sighting popping up, officially speaking, there are apparently not very many sightings that actually get officially reported. Graves estimates that roughly 5% of UAP sightings are reported. Again, mostly due to stigma. Quote, "I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issues this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are a concern for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue." So hopefully this whole situation means more sightings will be reported following the hearing. I guess we will have to wait and see. Moving on to number 2, they really are more advanced. Back to retired Navy Commander David Fravor. I touched a bit in a previous point about his 2004 video he captured, but we're actually gonna circle back because there is a little more. Not only was this small tic-tac shaped flying object flabbergasting because they didn't know what it was, but according to Fravor, quote, "There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any visible flight control surfaces like wings." Plus, Fravor explained that as he and the other pilots tried to get closer to the mysterious craft, quote, "It rapidly accelerated and disappeared right in front of our aircraft, leaving behind no detectable turbulence." Which essentially means whatever it was and whoever created it has far more access to superior technology than we do here on Earth. Fravor said, quote, "I'm not a UFO fanatic, but what we saw with our 4 sets of eyes, we have nothing close to it. It was incredible technology." Similarly, Grudge alleged at another time that the military had misused funds allocated for other programs to try to reverse engineer some of the supposedly non-human technology. And last up in our number 1 spot, there are still unanswered questions. While there was certainly some juicy deets revealed at the hearing, we were also left with even more questions and still a few skeptics. Representative Eric Burleson of Missouri said he found it far-fetched that an extraterrestrial species was technologically advanced enough to travel to Earth, yet is, quote, "somehow incompetent enough to survive Earth and crash." NASA also weighed in, saying that scientists have been searching for signs of life in our universe for years, but they have so far come up short. The space agency's missions have studied water on Mars, explored the ocean worlds, Titan and Europa, and looked for molecules that could be a sign of life in the atmospheres of alien planets, but claim that our understanding of life is still a bit fuzzy and ever-changing. Now, all of that being said, as per the Planetary Society, it is, quote, "very unlikely that Earth is the only home to intelligent life." So, we may be onto something here. I guess we'll just have to wait and see until more information is revealed.
Number 10. Triangle object. The Defense Department has confirmed that leaked photos and videos of an unidentified aerial phenomenon taken in 2019 are indeed legitimate images of unexplained objects. Photos and videos of triangle-shaped objects blinking and moving through the clouds were taken by Navy personnel, Pentagon spokeswoman Sue Go said in a statement to CNN. She also confirmed that photos of 3 unidentified flying objects, one spear-shaped, another acorn-shaped, and one characterized as a metallic blimp, were also taken by Navy personnel. As we have said before, to maintain operation security and to avoid disclosing information that may be useful to potential adversaries, DoD does not discuss publicly the details of either the observations or the examinations of reported incursions into our training ranges or designated airspace, including those incursions initially designed as UAP, she said. She also said that the Identified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, created to investigate UFO sightings observed by the military, has included these incidents in their ongoing examinations. Number 9. Drone footage. On April 19th, 2023, the Pentagon released another video featuring MQ-9 drone footage from the Middle East depicting a UAP. In the footage dated July 12th, 2022, which the US Defense Department shared online, the US military's MQ-9 Reaper drone, somewhere in the Middle East, exactly where wasn't disclosed, can be seen monitoring a strange metallic silver orb-like object flying around below it at some seemingly high speeds while the drone's camera tries to follow it. This footage is significant because while there have been previously declassified US military footage of UFOs, those were all taken by pilots in manned aircrafts. This one, however, was taken by a drone. However, this isn't the only time this particular UFO has been seen. Apparently, there has been many other sightings of a strange metallic orb in the Middle East. Sean M. Kirkpatrick, director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, told a Senate Armed Services subcommittee that it resembled a small metallic orb. He added there isn't an explanation for, but the reason for is due to lack of available data. It is going to be virtually impossible to fully identify that just based on that video, he said, according to ABC News. Number 8. ADAR. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of news reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of these events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has received 366 reports of UAP. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred before March 2021 but hadn't been included in the earlier report. The new numbers indicate a steep rise in UAP sightings. Now, the report released in June 2021 lists just 144 reports covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to the US government's effort to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risks the phenomenon poses, both with aviation hazard and potential advisable activity, such as foreign surveillance efforts. Number 7. Dancing lights. On January 29, 2023, Canadian air traffic controllers and pilots couldn't identify two white lights moving in a circular pattern reported over Canada's Northwest Territories. Good evening, just wondering, do you got two planes that are just to the east of your field doing circuits or maneuvers? A crew member aboard a Canadian North flight headed to Yellowknife asked air traffic controllers. Negative, I have no reported traffic in the area. The Yellowknife air traffic controller replied, do you have a visual on something? The crew responded somewhat hesitantly, yeah, we're looking at two lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us about I don't know what. We're not seeing them on the TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, but we can see lights moving around. Then there's a pause before the crew member on the radio back say, we're not crazy. No, we believe you, the air traffic controller replies, and the sighting remains unexplained. Number 6. Over New Mexico. On February 21st, 2021, a pilot flying over New Mexico at the altitude of 37,000 feet reported seeing a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type thing moving really fast over the top of them, according to published audio. American Airlines confirmed that the radio transmission came from flight 2292. The FAA a few days later stated, a pilot reported seeing an object over New Mexico shortly after noon local time on Sunday, February 21st, 2021. FAA air traffic controllers did not see any objects in the area of their radar scopes. Seems like air traffic can never see these objects, but the pilots can, and I can't tell if that's better or worse. Number 5. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in that area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when somewhere around Mansfield they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object they said looked like a blimp, pear-shaped and as big as a school bus. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding on the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about a strange low-flying flying light in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Township police officers to investigate, and one of them was Sergeant Toby Maloro, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all, and the object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, the sergeant decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. In total, at least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object at night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. Navy pilots. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise, but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then when the pilot got within half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. My question is, what was he going to do if he got closer? This whole story is just crazy. Number 2. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed UAP with his own eyes, has called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious object spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace, and these were not mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons, they could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means of lift or control surfaces, in other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have a clear understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with. If we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear. If there are things over our head and we're not sure what they are, well, we need to figure it out. If they're adverse role, it's a national security issue, we have mechanisms for that. If it's not a national security issue, then it's not an adversable platform, then it's a matter for scientific inquiry. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this scares me a little bit. And coming in at number 1 is leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage, obtained by a documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News, appeared to show a mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Amsa Combat Information Center, according to the filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appears to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed that the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said it will be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, a panel established last year to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the Disclosure Project. The Disclosure Project is a non-profit organization founded in 1993 by Dr. Stephen M. Greer, who was a physician and UFOologist, and the goal of the project is to bring forth information about the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence and their interactions with humanity to the public and government officials. The organization has collected over 800 witness testimonies from military, government, and intelligence officials who have had direct involvement with UFO sightings and extraterrestrial encounters. Literally, this entire group is aimed at doing exactly what we're here talking about today. The Disclosure Project believes that governments around the world have been suppressing information about the existence of extraterrestrial life, and that the truth needs to be disclosed to the public. We love a little whistleblowing. They advocate for the declassification of government files related to UFO sightings and for public hearings on the issue. The organization has received criticism and skepticism from some who believe their claims are unfounded. However, the Disclosure Project continues to push for transparency and the release of information to help us better understand our place place in the universe. Did you see those James Webb photos? How are we supposed to understand our place in the universe? Alright, when the universe is that big, buddy, still processing it. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Chilean UFO. Okay, so it turns out that there's been a lot of UFOs spotted in Chile, and the government isn't exactly shy about releasing some of the footage. In 2010, the Chilean government released a series of UFO footage that has since become one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the history of the phenomenon. The incident began in November 2010 when Chile's National Agency for UFO Research received reports of strange objects in the sky over the country's capital, Santiago. The agency then requested the assistance of the Chilean Air Force to investigate the sightings. The Air Force dispatched a team of experienced pilots to investigate the objects, which had been picked up on radar. The pilots were able to track the objects and capture video footage using advanced equipment. The footage showed multiple objects flying in formation at high speeds, performing maneuvers that seemed impossible, really, for any known aircraft. After careful analysis, the Chilean government concluded that the objects were not weather balloons, they were not aircrafts, or any other known objects. While the government did not explicitly state that the objects were extraterrestrial in nature, the incident has been widely regarded as one of the most credible pieces of evidence in support of the existence of UFOs. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Go Faster video. In 2017, after the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program became more well known, a video was released of an encounter between an FA-18 Super Hornet and some sort of unidentified flying object. This encounter wasn't actually supposed to be released initially, but the New York Times allegedly leaked it, so the government didn't really have much of a choice and decided to release it themselves. This video was the third in a series of 3 videos. We will talk about another one later on in this list. With this particular video, there weren't a ton of details released about exactly what happened during this encounter, but using the Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, they were able to capture an extremely fast-moving white oval that was around 45 feet long. The oval had no wings and didn't appear to have any kind of exhaust either. They were tracking the UFO at an altitude of 25,000 feet just above the Atlantic Ocean, and they were shocked as the craft rotated on its axis and flew away. There was no explanation released with the footage because it truly is unbelievable and currently unexplainable. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Phoenix Lights. The Phoenix Lights UFO incident occurred on March 13th, 1997, when thousands of people in Arizona reported seeing a series of bright lights in the sky in a V-shaped formation. Eyewitnesses described the lights as silent and moving slowly across the sky. The event gained significant media attention and became one of the most well-known UFO sightings in history. Some skeptics dismissed it as flares or a military exercise, but many other witnesses remained convinced that they had witnessed something otherworldly. One of the most interesting witnesses in this case is former Arizona Governor Fife Symington. In 2007, he decided to reveal that he had seen the object himself, and not only this, but he described it as not from this world. Despite the multiple witnesses and this government official's testimony, the incident remains a mystery, and to this day, no official explanation has been given for the strange lights seen in the sky. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Project Blue Book sighting. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once tasked with being an investigator for Project Blue Book, which was the name used to describe a study of UFOs conducted by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to December 17, 1969, when the project was terminated. While his job was meant to be to investigate and essentially debunk UFO sightings, later in life he took to Congress to stand up and explain his own UFO encounter that he was never able to explain away. The moment that truly stuck with him all of these years took place back in 1952. He was sent off to Newfoundland after there were reports that a UFO had crashed off of the coast of St. John's. As he arrived to the scene, there were at least 100 people who all stood and stared into the water, and as he was able to follow their gaze and see what they were all looking at, he couldn't believe his eyes. He recalled the water being quite clear, and under it you could see 2 circular crafts, each one approximately 18 feet in diameter. He said that they were both floating just below the surface of the water, no more than 20 feet from the shore, and not only this, but he could also see two beings with the crafts. He said, quote, "The first thing I saw was the UFOs, and it was apparent to me that they were doing something to the craft, and I couldn't really tell what because they were on the bottom side of it and not visible to me except when they would occasionally get over to the side where I could see them." He claimed he watched on as the beings worked on the craft until one of them raised out of the water and disappeared, but not before accelerating to speeds in the neighborhood of 2,500 to 3,000 miles an hour. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Coyne Mansfield incident. The Coyne Mansfield helicopter incident occurred on October 18, 1973, when 4 members of the Ohio Army National Guard were flying in a helicopter over Mansfield, Ohio. Suddenly, they encountered a large metallic disc-shaped object that was hovering in the sky. The object began to move towards the helicopter, causing the crew to take evasive maneuvers. Despite their efforts, the object continued to follow them, eventually passing overhead and disappearing into the distance. The crew reported the incident to their superiors, and an investigation was launched by the military and the Federal Aviation Administration. The incident received significant media attention, and it remains one of the most compelling UFO sightings on record. What makes this incident particularly intriguing is the credibility of the witnesses. The crew were experienced pilots with military training, and their account of the incident was corroborated by radar data and other witnesses on the ground. Despite the extensive investigations, no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered for what they saw that day. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Congress report. For this one, we are talking about a recent report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there has been a total of 510 unidentified aerial phenomena observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which, quote, "appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities." It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing. What we, as the public, know is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual, real, secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise one day, we'll find out. In our number 3 spot today, we have the advanced technology. So this UFO sighting comes from a while ago, but it just recently became quite relevant, and that is because some former US Air Force personnel have begun explaining to the Pentagon that they believe back in the 60s there were UFOs that supposedly had the ability to turn off their nuclear warheads. Apparently these officers recently told this to the government's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, who had contacted former Air Force ICBM launch officer Robert Salas to get information about the encounter with an orange flying disc that switched off 10 warheads at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana in 1963. There was another former officer, Dr. Robert Jacobs, who also apparently told the AARO that he had gone as far as to make a film of the UFO for the Air Force in 1964, and that this film captured images of a UFO shooting a test missile out of the sky. With the piquing interest in UFOs and the potential for an advanced civilization apart from our own, it appears as though the government is spending more time now researching and looking into these claims because, well, why would they make them up and then continue on with the same story some 50 years later? In our number 2 spot today, we have the USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO incident. This UFO sighting comes from 2004. On November 14th of that year, the USS Princeton noticed an unknown aircraft of some sort that was about 100 miles off of the coast of San Diego. For 2 weeks prior to this crew had been tracking a strange flying object that would start out at around 80,000 feet before extremely extremely quickly dropping to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate went over in 2 fighter jets, and when they arrived they saw what at first appeared to be churning water, while there was an oval shape just below the surface. After this, a white oval-shaped object appeared above the water, but it had no markings on it. Like no windows, nothing that would indicate an engine, no wings, and the infrared monitors on the jets didn't pick up any sort of exhaust. The commander and lieutenant commander tried to intercept this strange aircraft, but it very quickly flew away and reappeared on the monitor 60 miles away. And when I say quickly, I mean that it was moving at 3 times the speed of sound and over twice the speed of the fighter jets. So faster than any kind of technology we currently have. We still don't know exactly what it was, but it certainly was beyond our current capabilities. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Roswell incident. This incident is like the mecca when it comes to a government leak. I mean, this incident is infamous for a reason. The whole thing started in 1947 when some sort of crash took place near a ranch in Roswell, New Mexico. Shortly after this, the Roswell Army Airfield released a statement saying that they had recovered a flying disc from the ranch, but the Army quickly retracted the statement and said that it wasn't that, but instead it was just a conventional weather balloon. So it was a little sketchy, but most people just let it slide until the 1970s. What happened in the 70s is that a retired lieutenant colonel began to speak out. In an interview with a UFO researcher, he said that the weather balloon story was a cover-up and that alien remains were actually recovered from the crash site. There were both first and second-hand witnesses who claimed that not only were there at least one, but possibly more alien spacecrafts that had crashed at the scene, but also that extraterrestrial remains were recovered by the military, who then began to engage in a cover-up. In 1994, the story changed from a weather balloon to a nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul, and it was stated that the stories of the alien bodies were probably just test dummies that had been dropped from high altitudes. I'm not gonna lie, the whole thing sounds a little sketchy. I obviously wasn't there, so I can't say for certain what happened, but someone is definitely lying about it.
Such as number 10's Ryan Graves. For those of us who keep our heads deep under a rock as possible, such as myself, Ryan Graves has been breaking the internet recently with his very vocal claims of UFOs, going as far to say that he saw them every day in his time as a Navy pilot. Now, the dude is no foil hat freak. He comes packing your usual high qualifications and certifications needed for this role. So Graves is a former Navy pilot and engineer, chairs of America Institute Aeronautics and Astronautics, UAP Integration and Outreach Committee, and now the founder of the new nonprofit Americans for Safe Aerospace, which is like Mothers Against Drunk Driving for our atmosphere. Graves chose to testify in front of Congress last month about how he feels these UAP, which is the boring version of a UFO, are actually a threat to our security and safety. So in April of 2014, his FA-18 squadron was on a training mission, and he said after achieving 12,000 feet in what's an exclusive naval airspace, i.e. nobody can fly here zone, 2 jets crossed the threshold to find, and I quote, a dark gray cube inside of a clear sphere, motionless against the wind, fixed directly at the entry point. He goes on to say that the jets, only 100 feet apart, zipped past the object on either side. The pilots had come so dangerously close to something they couldn't identify that they terminated the training mission immediately and returned to base. Ryan Graves said that the flight leader, in extreme duress, told him, "I almost hit one of those damn things, man," in the pilot's ready room, and that we all knew exactly what he meant by those damn things, as they'd been plaguing us for the last 8 months. Having had this harrowing and potentially deathly experience, should things have been slightly different, Graves felt the need to develop a reporting service for pilots who come across these unidentified flying objects, shedding light on a huge amount of investment that goes into the training of commercial pilots. Graves questioned the government for turning its back on the UAP reports, even though they all come from credible eyewitnesses. Number 9, which is the 2022 H0219. So, unlike America, Canada actually does have a UFO entry database for pilots. It's called KDORS, and it'll document anything from unruly passengers on flights to birds getting sucked into engines to aliens, apparently. As long as it's causing a problem and it's in the air, KDORS wants to know about it. Now, Transport Canada, despite having a reporting service for such things as UFOs, still cautions that reports contain preliminary, unconfirmed data that can be subject to change. And 2022 H0219 is the KDORS case number assigned to an incident that took place on September 17th of 2022, when an Air Canada flight from Toronto, quote, reported passing an unidentified object approximately 10 feet above the captain's window while making a left-hand bank at 1,300 feet just an hour before sunset. The report continues to mention that the flight crew couldn't identify the object, which is confusing seeing as it's 10 feet from the captain's window, and they went on to land without further incident. Now the report wraps itself up with that, and trust me, if you visit the Cater's log, it's vague at best. But now you have a bit more context as to why they have that subject to change warning on their website. I'm not saying they would casually omit details, but you really think something was 10 feet away from the pilot and the airline's attendants' faces and they couldn't ID it? On to number 8, which is 2022-02794. Another Cater's flight sighting. So there is quite literally no shortage of them. According to CTV, from unidentified objects to strange lights, Canadian aviation officials receive at least 16 unusual reports in 2022, including 11 from pilots flying for Air Canada, WestJet, Virgin Atlantic, United, and more. This report was made by Nav Canada on November 12th of 2022. It was a cargo freighter flying from Chicago to Frankfurt, Germany overnight. The route taken brings the pilots right overhead northeastern Ontario where good things grow. The Cater's document, which was entered a few days after the incident, states that the pilots reported seeing lights that were moving eastward at the same speed as the aircraft while flying in the dark. Now, there's no further information on this one, but I sure wish there was. Number 7 is a break from Cater reports. It's going to be the racetrack. So veteran pilot Chris Van Voorhis told the Daily Mail of a strange encounter he had had in which 3 to 5 bright objects flew in a circular motion like a racetrack for hours on end over top of the Pacific Ocean in August of 2022. Their racetrack seemed to stretch from Honolulu to Los Angeles and then back. Similar to Graves, the 63-year-old Voorhis ain't some random dude in a tinfoil hat. He's racked up over 32,000 hours of flight experience working with multiple airlines, and when he witnessed this awe-inspiring yet decidedly creepy phenomena, Voorhis said that he was hit with an onslaught of other airline pilots radioing in to ask if he was seeing the objects as well. Apparently, as he told Daily Mail, about half of his pilot friends have seen some type of anomaly in the sky. They had to be in a very, very high orbit, or actually even in space quite a ways away from anything that a satellite would be, because every time we were seeing it, it was in the lower right-hand corner of the Big Dipper, no matter where we were in the world, he told the outlet. It lasted for such a long time that it actually became boring. Almost. Van Voorhis's employer, whose name is withheld, forbade him from speaking about the incident. However, that hasn't kept him from running his mouth, claiming to have also seen 3 flying discs in a triangular formation back in 2004. Number 6 will be the letter response. After tackling the dragon that is paywalls, I was able to scrape together the details of a letter written by Art Sabowski, entitled A Pilot Explains UFOs for the Last Time. Now, to save you guys some time and the paywalls, Art's letter is essentially him complaining that he spent 45 years as a pilot and hasn't seen boo, and all his pilot friends haven't seen anything either, therefore no pilot could have ever seen anything ever, and if they have, they're either Mary Jane smoking or visually impaired. Essentially, you could title his letter, I am mad other professional aviators have seen something and I haven't. Now the whole argument of if I haven't seen a thing, therefore it does not exist is pretty much the argument of UFO non-believers. This is why Ralph Lowinger was quick to fire back a response. So UFOs don't exist because you and your friends haven't seen one? I know they exist because I was a co-pilot of a Pan-American cargo flight with 5 crew members who clearly saw their formation. It was on a crystal clear moonless night over Nova Scotia's south coast, and we all watched and saw the same thing through different panes of cockpit glass. Their dance was from another world. It lasted 5 minutes and terminated with the most dazzling feat of aerodynamics we have ever seen. I have now retired to the largest fly-in community in the world, in which many highly trained observers know that UFOs are real, cataracts and floaters aside. Lowinger and other crew members never reported their sightings, but their story did come to light in 2011. Number 5 will be the skydivers. So this story comes out of the Virginia pilot Julius Figueroa in July of 2022. Julius had served in the Navy as a pilot for 2 years before getting a job in the Midwest as a skydive pilot. What would be considered an everyday venture, loaded up with his usual adrenaline junkies trying to touch the clouds, Julius and his passengers experienced a different kind of adrenaline-invoking experience. We were climbing 10,000 feet and at around 4,300 feet, I was looking into the distance and this thing caught my eye, Figueroa said. It started getting closer and it was approaching me about 15 feet to my left heading north. Figueroa goes on to say that the object was spherical golden orb that was flying very fast, but interestingly, he reported that you couldn't see the object when you looked at it directly. Other pilots have reported the same thing during their encounters, and it does sound like an explanation for what happened even in our first story, where Gray's team didn't notice the flying anomaly until they were about to crash into it. Julia said that the object was the size of a small car, and without realizing it, he started turning his plane to the left. As the object passed by, Figueroa said he started yelling, causing the other people in the back of the plane to look out the window. 3 of the skydivers see it, including one of the instructors, Figueroa says. By the time I turned the plane, it was already on the horizon, and shortly after, the object was gone. Figueroa contacted air traffic control and asked them if they'd seen a drone on radar, to which they said they didn't. He called again and described the object he saw and asked if they had seen it. To quote him, there was a long pause on the other end, and then they said they didn't see it. Number 4 will be the Passover, and not the one with the matzo and the karpas. I'm still full from the last one. I'm talking about the weird and very underdocumented occurrence from June of 2023 in which a pilot in Toronto reported, and I quote, seeing a person in a wingsuit flying at an altitude of 13,000 feet. Now, articles did mention that this incident was filed with Transport Canada. However, even after spending hours searching KDORs, I was unable to find a report or provide a case number. But to give you an idea why this reporting is so weird, aside from everything about it, A, who uses a wingsuit nowadays? And B, this altitude actually breaches the death zone. For those of us who don't climb Mount Everest in our free time, the death zone is to refer to the point at which an altitude's lack of oxygen becomes insufficient to sustain human life. The average person tends to die around altitudes of 8,000 feet and higher, and it's all attributed to the physical capabilities of cellular oxygenation. So what does that mean? Aliens. Number 3 is gonna be our last CADORD report of the list. It is 2022-1004. Where? Kitchener-Waterloo area. For my viewers outside of Canada, it's a few hours drive from Toronto, Ontario, and it's a lovely little college town chock full of frat boys, geese, and hockey. And now, apparently, their new claim to fame is that there's some aliens all up overhead. During the daylight hours of May 28, 2022, local police were notified after multiple reports were received by local traffic of unidentified object, possibly a balloon or a radio-controlled plane, at 3,000 feet and 7 nm south of Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. It's incredibly frustrating trying to pursue more knowledge or information on this sighting, as unfortunately its documentation is limited to what I just told you. You'd think there have been so many witnesses and reports between pilot and citizens alike, perhaps there'd be more statements. What I did learn, however, is since Ontario kept popping up for these sightings and I was curious, is that according to 2022 numbers, Quebec led all provinces with about 29% of all Canadian UFO reports, narrowly edging out Ontario, who has 28% out of the total recorded 786 sightings in our country. Number 2 is the Tic Tac. Remember Ryan Graves and how he testified to Congress? Well, he's not the only one who did. During a hearing before the House lawmakers, retired Navy fighter pilot and Commander David Fravor testified about his experience seeing what he described as a Tic Tac looking object while on a flight back in 2004. Commanding the FA-18F squadron on the USS Nimitz, he and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich were on a flight off the coast of Southern California on November 14th of 2004 when they saw a flying object. The advanced radar on the ship was part of their training group and detected what operators called multiple anomalous aerial vehicles over the horizon, descending 80,000 feet in less than a second. Fravor and Dietrich swerved over that way to investigate, each carrying an extra witness, the weapons system officer, in the backs of their jets. Fravor recalls the experience. I said, dude, do you see that thing down there? And we saw this little white Tic Tac looking object, and it was just kind of moving above the whitewater area. Fravor went in for a closer look. He described the Tic Tac object mirroring his movement, saying it was aware we were there and that all 4 of us in the airplanes literally were watching this thing for roughly about 5 minutes. The object was about the size of Fravor's FA-18F with no markings, no wings, and no visible exhaust plumes. When Fravor tried to cut off the strange flying anomaly, it accelerated so quickly it seemed to disappear. He said it was detected roughly 60 miles away less than a minute later. I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and capabilities that we had at that time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years. And coming in at at number 1 will be the 7. So this ex-FBI agent named Ben Hansen is now the host of the Discovery Plus TV series UFO Witness. He works hard to try and bring attention to UFOs, and in doing so collects worldwide reports and videos he can share that are as credible as possible. He compiled accounts from pilots from Southwest Airlines, Hawaiian Airlines, and others between August 6th and September 23rd of 2022. And in the captivating account we'll be discussing from this time period, a former military pilot reported seeing multiple aircrafts flying above him. Pilot Mark Hillsley was flying a charter jet on August 18th of 2022 off the coast of Los Angeles when he suddenly radioed in the following: "We've got a few aircrafts to our north here, and he's going around in circles, much higher altitude than us. Any idea what they are?" The confused controller responds, telling the pilot he's not sure. Halsey then calls back 23 minutes later to say that the 3 aircrafts he had originally reported had now increased to 7, flying between 5,000 and 10,000 feet above him in a regimented pattern. While the controller continues to dismiss him, we hear the anxiety spike in Halsey, who's absolutely adamant, stating in the recorded footage to the controller that they just keep going in circles. "I was an F-18 pilot in the Marine Corps, and I'm telling you, I've done many intercepts, I've never seen anything like this." According to Hansen, the strange lights that some pilots reported as possible aircrafts were seen by upwards of 15 different commercial flights, and that at least 6 pilots are willing to go on record with their names and everything if asked to do so by any investigative agencies. According to Hansen, it means in this case we have a global phenomena as far west as Japan to as far east as possibly Miami. Whatever it is, these pilots are seeing it from halfway across the world. Hansen said there's no official protocol for reporting strange sightings for civilian pilots because they don't think the FAA will follow up, or worse, they will be ridiculed. But as we know, Ryan Graves is working to change that.
Coming in at number 10 is Antonio Villas-Boas. On the night of October 16th, 1957, Antonio Villas-Boas was plowing fields when he saw what he described as a red star in the night sky that approached him, growing in size. The craft began descending to land in the field, and he decided to leave on his tractor, but its lights and engine died, so he decided to continue on foot. However, he was seized by a 5-foot-tall humanoid who was wearing gray coveralls and a helmet. Its eyes were small and blue, and instead of speech it made noises like barks or yelps. 3 similar beings then joined and dragged him inside their aircraft. Once inside the craft, Antonio said he was stripped of his clothes and covered from head to toe with a strange gel. He was then led to a large semicircular room through a doorway that had strange red symbols written over it. They then took blood from him and took him to a third room where some kind of gas was pumped into the room, which made him violently ill. Shortly after this, Antonio was joined in the room by another humanoid. This one, however, was female, very attractive. Antonio was then given back his clothing and taken on a tour of the ship by the humanoids. He was then escorted off the ship and watched as it took off, glowing brightly. When he returned home, he discovered that only 4 hours had passed. Now, did he help create one of the first alien-human hybrids? I think so. Number 9, Elizabeth Clarer. Elizabeth Clarer was a South African woman who, starting in 1956, publicly claimed to have been contacted by aliens multiple times between 1954 and 1963. Her first visitation supposedly occurred when she was just 7 years old, and she was one of the first women to claim relationship with an extraterrestrial. She promoted an idea of a better world and beliefs in a cosmic consciousness. In her book Beyond the Light Barrier, she strived to convey a message of peace, love, understanding, and environmentalism, which she credited to the superior wisdom of an advanced and immaculately utopian Venusian civilization. She also ended up promoting conspiracy theories of an international cover-up that kept vital information from the public and claimed to have been threatened with abduction to press her to revealing details about alien technology. Number 8, Terrell Copeland. The Virginia pilot Terrell Copeland claimed that he was abducted by aliens, particularly because he was a Marine. Terrell claimed that his first experience with aliens occurred in 2007 when he captured footage of what he believed to be a UFO on his cell phone from his apartment in Suffolk, Virginia. It was an orb of light, just a big ball of light. It wasn't moving, it was solid white. The other was directly across the street from it, up 300 feet above the ground, and was changing colors very rapidly.
rapidly, he said. He alleged that it wasn't until after he published the footage online that things truly became strange. I woke up from a nap by the sound of someone trying to enter my apartment, and I said, "Who is it?" There was no answer. You could see the doorknob moving and scratching at the door. The firearm, it was on my table, and my thought was to get up and check. Despite the urge to get up, Terrell was paralyzed and only able to move his eyes. Suddenly, he heard a voice through the door tell him, "You don't need that weapon, we won't harm." He then began to experience missing hours as well, and he was incapable of accounting for 4 waking hours during a span of 2 nights. I was in a room and I saw a woman who did not have complete human features. She had the typical black eyes that you hear about, she had an elongated skull, and that startled me. The next memory I have is me standing on my balcony waving at this cylinder-shaped ship, he said. Number 7. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker. The Pescalua abduction was a UFO sighting and alien abduction in 1973, in which Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker claimed they were abducted by aliens while fishing in Mississippi. On the evening of October 11, 1973, 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker told the Jackson County, Mississippi Sheriff's Office that they were fishing off a pier on the west bank of the river when they heard a whirling whiz sound, saw 2 flashing blue lights, and observed an oval-shaped object 30 to 40 feet across 8 to 10 feet high. They claimed that they were conscious but paralyzed, while 3 creatures with robotic slit mouths and crab-like pincers took them aboard the object and subjected them to an examination. Number 6. Thomas Reed. On September 1st, 1969, Thomas Reed and his family in Berkshire County, Massachusetts saw a UFO. In the car with his mother, brother, and grandmother that night, the family noticed a group of glowing orbs dash out of the roadside trees. It came to a stop off the right side of the road, Thomas said. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. It was just like dead silent. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud, and that was it. Then the family suddenly found itself back in the car, but they had inexplicably lost 2 hours of memory. Stranger still, Thomas's mother and grandmother had somehow switched car seats. He said over time the family regained some memory of the incident, including having been to a hangar-like facility with other people. We encountered something, it was definitely not of this world. The hangar thing we were in was huge, it was larger than a football field. The hallway we had seen was circular with a Y configuration, almost to control the flow of traffic, and this one room had a bowed-in wall that was round, he said. Number 5. Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber had written fiction for more than 40 years, and he said his writing streak was interrupted one night in the late 80s by an alien abduction in upstate New York. The alleged incident occurred on the night of December 26, 1985, as Whitley slept alone in his cabin in the woods. Woken by a strange noise, he saw a small non-human entity approaching his bed. Then suddenly it was morning. According to him, beings that he has since referred to as visitors entered his home and abducted him. Now, he also detailed another alien encounter that he claims took place in Toronto. Asleep in his Delta Chelsea hotel room in the middle of the night on June 6, 1998, Whitley claimed to have been visited by another mysterious stranger. "I got up to open the door thinking it was a room service waiter. It was not. It was a man I described as about 5.5 feet tall, older looking, like someone in his 70s. He wore dark-colored clothing, a turtleneck, and charcoal slacks. He claimed the visitor stood motionless by the window for nearly an hour, expounding on the dangers of creating an intelligence more involved than its creator. He said it was the most extraordinary conversation I've ever had in my life." Number 4. Frederick Valentich. On October 21st, 1978, Australian pilot Frederick Valentich disappeared into thin air. At 7:06 p.m., while at 4,500 feet, after departing, he reported that an unidentified craft was following him. Melbourne Flight Service insisted that there was no traffic near him, but the pilot was adamant. He explained that it had 4 bright lights and suddenly passed 1,000 feet above him at a remarkable speed. For 5 straight minutes, Frederick described its movements and shiny metallic exterior. Suddenly, he experienced engine trouble and said the aircraft was hovering and it's not an aircraft. Then they never heard from him again. The last sound radio officials heard was a metallic scraping sound. Now, authorities presume that he had crashed, but a later search of the area yielded nothing. In 2014, a UFO action group in Victoria alleged that a farmer observed a UFO nearly 90 feet in length hovering above his farm on the morning following Frederick's disappearance. The farmer also claimed that the pilot's plane was stuck to the UFO, leaking oil. But again, Frederick and the plane have never been found. Ultimately, a few possibilities regarding the disappearance of Frederick exist: that he crashed and his remains were never recovered, that he purposely disappeared, or, of course, he was abducted by aliens. Number 3. Audrey and Debbie Hewins. Twins Audrey and Debbie Hewins said they were abducted by aliens. I was probably about 5 years old or so, said Audrey, and a bright blue light would come into the room and the door would open, and there would be like a foggy kind of misty blue light just shining through the whole house, and these two figures would come in. We have been up in crafts and seen our house from above. They're very good at mind erasing, or whatever you want to call it. They'll leave you with bits and pieces of things that you can remember. Debbie added, I remember one time being on a spaceship and standing there on the spaceship and the floor and the walls disappeared. They started doing all kinds of experiments on us when we were 12. While she was initially hesitant to come forward, Audrey claimed that after a non-human entity saved her life from drowning in the ocean, she was inspired to dedicate her life to openly discussing her alien abduction experiences. Number 2. Travis Walton. On November 5th, 1975, Travis Walton was abducted by aliens and he didn't return for 5 whole days. Travis's abduction began after working at the Site Graves National Forest near Heber, Arizona. Travis and a 6-man group of loggers were returning home when they allegedly spotted a shiny disc spanning 40 feet in diameter hovering in the sky above them. He said it was a metallic glowing disc making some very strange sounds. The closer I got to it, the more scared we all got, and they were swearing at me to get away from there, and when I got up close, it suddenly got louder and started to move. Travis then claimed that non-human beings abducted him and experimented on him until he fought them off. But as the being supposedly poked and prodded at him on a kind of table, 5 days elapsed on Earth where Walton was officially declared missing. I became conscious inside the craft, and I believe I was in the hospital. I was in a lot of pain, and as I became more conscious, I looked around and saw alien beings, and I just panicked. They were much smaller than me, and I think that's the reason why they gave up. Once they found out they couldn't control me, they split. Now, later research conducted at the site of Travis's abduction showed an unusual growth rate in the trees where the craft had allegedly hovered. The trees near the site were found to be producing wood fiber at a rate of 36 times greater than they had been in the decades before. And coming in number 1 is Dr. Albert Bender. One of the most famous instances of alien invasion was the case of Dr. Albert Bender. Albert was a very intelligent researcher with an interest in aliens and UFOs, and even founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau. It was successful as he began to gather lots of alleged evidence related to UFOs, but soon he began seeing strange men watching him around his town, reportedly with glowing eyes. Then one night in 1953, 3 men in black showed up to his house. The mysterious men looked at first to be government agents, but he soon discovered they were something from a completely different realm. The men made it clear to Albert that he was to immediately stop all UFO research and investigation and to cease any publishing. They then confiscated most of his findings before threatening him once more and vanishing. Then he had a second encounter where he was visited by 3 shadowy figures. They did not touch the floor but hovered above it, and they told him that their human appearance was an illusion and that whatever information he told people about their visitation would not be believed. They supposedly told him that they capture people from Earth and use their bodies to disguise themselves. Now, due to all this, Albert was so afraid of the experience that he immediately halted all publishings, quit ufology, and turned into a completely different man. Years later, he published a book about his experience with the men in black and went on to manage a motel and never touched extraterrestrial research ever again. Coming in at number 10 is the orange disc. In 2020, a report of a UFO over the Vatican in 2007 came to life. UFO hunter Scott Waring believes the unidentified flying object's shape closely resembles a flying saucer. He said on his UFO Sightings daily blog, "This report is from 2007 but was just reported today at MUFON. on. An orange disc was caught in a photograph over Vatican City. UFOs have been seen over the Vatican before, but orange UFOs are usually seen in South America and Central America, so this is odd. The object is a disc viewed from the side. The disc doesn't have a classic hump, but instead its upper center comes to a point and lower center is flat, no bulge at all. For me, I can clearly see this is a disc. It's a little in focus, so it's not that far back. It looks to be about 10 meters, 33 feet across. If it was traveling fast, it may have gotten caught by accident. This is absolutely real and absolutely alien in origin. Then Scott said the Vatican's stance of alien life comes mostly from scientific analysis of chemicals, substances, and textbook strategies of old. Vatican astronomers would never confirm any UFO as being real unless it landed in Vatican City. Number 9. First crash ever. The world's first crash of an unidentified flying object, UFO, happened in Italy in 1933 during the reign of Benito Mussolini, Italian researcher Robert Pinotti claimed. Roberto spoke to the Daily Mail and even shared evidence to back his claims. Now, Roberto is the president of the National Ufological Center in Italy, and his research has been met with skepticism within Italy itself. Now, Roberto and his colleague have been working to learn more about the 1933 crash in Lombardy and received some original secret documents about it in 1996. The documents were sent to the researchers by an unidentified source who claimed to have inherited these from a relative who lived at the time and was part of the secret department allegedly set up by Mussolini to study the saucer. Now, the documents also include handwritten memos that have a sketch and description of the UFO with portholes on the side. Number 8. Donut UFO. In 1978, unidentified flying objects that gave off green, red, and white lights and had a donut-like hole in the middle were reported and in some cases photographed at dozens of places between Sicily and Milan in the north. It was reported by none other than the officers on duty in the operation of police headquarters. Dozens of people called, all with the same message. We see an enormous beam of green light just overhead. A lieutenant and non-commissioned officer, driven by curiosity, as they said later, ran out on the terrace and one exclaimed, "I see an enormous beam of green light." A bank clerk, Nino Raffagino, said he spotted an object just before midnight, made a dash for his 1000mm telephoto lens, and came up with a series of pictures that appeared in the press. One taken when the object was stationary, according to Nino, showed a disc of light with a hole in the middle. Officers that were alerted by citizens' calls also snapped pictures and sent them to the newspapers. Taken while the object appeared to be moving, they showed a long, wide streak of light in the dark sky. Number 7. Recent sighting. A low-quality blurred image said to depict a UFO or a weird object escorted by 2 military aircraft over northeastern Italy made the news. The photograph was published by some local media outlets, which reported that around 7:20 p.m. on March 23, 2021, several witnesses noticed 2 aircrafts coming from the southeast and heading northwest, escorting from distance what was described as a large square or diamond-shaped object which incorporated from 10 to 12 fixed yellow lights. According to the reports, the object traveled very fast and left behind an intense trail, and the only noise that was perceived was that of the 2 planes flying at a lower altitude than the square object at a much lower speed. 1.5 minutes was the average duration of these sightings, enough to spark discussion of what this mysterious object was. So much so, the photograph was also brought to the attention of the Italian for National UFO Center, which started its own investigation. Number 6. 20-second sighting. There are episodes in Italy which whole crowds have witnessed inexplicable phenomena. On October 13, 2016, a series of people spotted a UFO in the sky over Geneva. The sighting lasts for 20 seconds, and there are those who had time to take photos or videos from different points in the city. The Air Force was contacted immediately, but no trace of the object was found in radar tracks. It seems like we'll never know what this strange object was, but I believe the people who saw it. Number 5. pilot discovery. On June 18th, 1979, the then pilot Marshal Giancarlo Sansoni was returning from a photographic survey. Giancarlo, who belonged to the 14 group of the 2 fighter-bomber reconnaissance wing of the Italian Air Force, was on board a G91R equipped with 4 Vitin cameras located in this way. 2 on the sides of the front of the cockpit, 1 in the front position, and the 4th at the ventral position. With these, he had carried out the photographic surveys that he had been in charge of, but while flying, he saw something strange. He then arranged with the ground control body staff to go and identify an object that was detected by the radar. At the moment of the sighting, it occurred to him that it could be a solar UFO, but then he realized it was something different. The day was beautiful, and he soon realized that the black spot had very different characteristics. It appeared to him in the shape of a dull black fuel tank, and on its slightly flattened upper part, he noticed a fairing with 2 mustaches. This was underlying something clear and white, which in his opinion was a kind of milky white dome. The characteristics of the surface did not allow the refraction of light, and the object appeared to have a length of about 6 to 8 meters and a width of about 3 meters. Now, during the sighting, which lasted about 5 minutes, Giancarlo was able to take more than 80 photographs that showed the object was always in the same frontal position or slightly angled. In fact, this thing was never completely visible from the side, and it was as if the thing wanted to aim the plane. Number 4. Factory worker. On April 24th, 1950, a factory worker named Bruno Facciani was working the late shift and stepped outside to get some fresh air on his break. Investigating a bright glowing light, which he thought was a part of a factory transformer problem, he was shocked to see a circular shape glowing object with a ladder descended from its bottom. At the top of the UFO was a greenish glow which partially obscured a light-skinned being. The unusual being appeared to be welding something on the craft. Then he said several other small alien creatures emerged from the craft, and in a moment or two the ladder began to be drawn up into the mysterious craft, and the beings began to re-enter the craft through an invisible door of some kind. The full realization of what he was witnessing sent Bruno to run away from the frightening encounter. Now, as he fled, he heard a sound like that of a large beehive. One of the remaining creatures pointed a type of weapon at him, and a beam of force knocked him to the ground. Although in pain, he was able to watch the aliens as they prepared the craft to take off. The beehive-like sound increased as the object made its way into the skies and vanished from view. Now, the next day, Bruno made a full report of his encounter to the police force, and there were signs still visible of the activities of the night before. Police found burn patches on the ground and indentation marks of an extremely heavy object. They also found some odd green pieces of a metal-like substance. Number 3. Green Alien. On the night of December 6, 1978, night watchman Pierre Zanfretta was on a routine patrol when he stumbled into a series of terrifying encounters with extraterrestrial beings. His car inexplicably lost power en route to a client's unoccupied home. He then glanced through his window and saw 4 lights moving in the garden of the house he was coming to inspect. Assuming that the beams were coming from burglars, he climbed from his car with his revolver and flashlight in hand. Now, just as he prepared to leap out to confront these trespassers, he felt something touch his shoulder from behind. Pierre spun around, but instead of finding a human criminal, he saw an entity that he described as being an enormous green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin as though they were very fat or dressed in a loose gray tunic no less than 10 feet tall. It was flanked by 2 similar beasts. He said these beings were hairy, had greenish skin, had horns on the sides of their faces, yellow triangular eyes, and red veins embedded in their foreheads. He also described a unique self-illuminated mechanical apparatus that fit over their mouths. Now, he was so shocked that he ran away, and I think that was the best option. Number 2. The Abduction. In April 1962, Taylor Mario Zuccala was walking home through the woods when, at a crossroad clearing where the path crossed a small canal, he felt himself struck by a sharp gust of wind. An object like an inverted bowl passed overhead and came close to the ground about 6 to 7 meters away. From its underside came a cylinder which opened up, revealing a diffuse of white light from which 2 beings emerged. They were 1.5 meters tall, dressed in metallic suits, wearing helmets with with antennas. He then approached Mario and led him into the empty interior of the object, which was lit by the same diffused light. He was unable to make out any details of the interior. They then let go of him as a voice from the inner part of the object, like one amplified by a microphone and as if resounding in a vast space, spoke to him in Italian. The only part Mario could remember was a message that at the fourth moon they would return at 1 in the morning to give him a message for humanity. He was then escorted out of the object and somehow found himself outside his own door. His wife heard 4 loud knocks, which he does not remember making, and found him terrified on the front porch. And coming at number 1 is the whistleblower. Pentagon whistleblower David Grudge, in some more baffling claims, said the Vatican was fully aware of non-human intelligence's existence and that it assisted the United States in retrieving a UFO. Making some shocking revelations, David stated that a top-secret UFO retrieval program was run by the United States for decades, and added that the Vatican was involved in the first ever crash of a UFO, as per media reports. David stated that the UFO's first recovery took place in Magenta, Italy in 1933. He added that the UFO was in possession of Italian dictator Mussolini's government until 1944 to 1945, when America was tipped off by it by Pope Pius XII. He added that the UFO was partially intact and was kept at a secure airbase until it was retrieved by the US after the fascist Italy's regime collapse. 1933 was the first recovery in Europe in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle, and the Italian government moved it to a secure airbase in Italy until around 1944 to 1945. The Pope back-channeled that and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it, David said. While clarifying whether the Catholic Church knew about the non-human existence on Earth, David said, "Certainly." He said that his claims must be believed because I have the credentials and I was an intelligence officer. He stated that UFO sightings were widely known during Mussolini's dictatorship in Italy.